Our old railroads across rural America, they served so many communities, but a lot of these railroad lines are gone. The main lines are still running for the train, but all these old lines, some still remain, but a lot are gone in history. Of all the communities they served, and all the little depots they stopped at in every little town across rural America and these Appalachian mountains, they served a lot of communities. And these old places are all but gone, these old depots. And so many a family back then traveled these trains for transportation between the counties, communities. But sadly, in them old days, safety was not that big a concern at first, and they had a lot of accidents on these old railroads. Bad accidents. Either it be from human error, bad maintenance, bad design, so many early flaws. Sadly, so many hundreds across rural America lost their life in these train accidents. Now this little story is about a railroad line between Cumberland Gap and Knoxville, Tennessee. Its history and some tragedy that ensued on building this railroad and how it came to be. Now this old railroad line run from Knoxville to Cumberland Gap was started in 1887, and you can see the map right here of how the line run. Where all the little depots was is marked here, and it covered a lot of countryside here, approximately around 70 miles. Crossing Clinch River, Powell River, which is North Lake today. And this line is still here. Now here is built by L&N Railroad and its contractors. Now here's a map of L&N Railroad at the time of 1890. And one of their main hubs was in Knoxville, Tennessee, L&N Railroad, Louisville and Nashville Railroad. Now this little line here is marked in red, circled in yellow, is the little railroad line that runs between the Gap and Knoxville. Insignificant on the map. Well, they had to build about at least 5 or 6 tunnels and about 5 or 6 big trestles supposed to cross the waterways and these hollers. Yes, this is the old Lonesome Valley train trestle. It's 800 foot long and 133 foot high. A lot of history here. This is a tragic site at one time. Now to find out about this I'll give you a little history background on this thing of why this railroad came to be. And this is Cumberland Gap you're looking at. Down Cumberland mountain range. Used to be the gateway to the west. And so much history has passed over time through this hole in the mountain. This is the site of the Wilderness Road came through here. Daniel Boone blazed a trail through here into Kentucky. And 500,000 people's passed through this gap over the years to modern times. And you want to know, if you don't know nothing about the area, it's easy to find on a map. It's where 3 states come together, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, and marked here as Middlesboro. It's a big thing, and this is what founded this area, really got it really going. And like I said, there's so much history past here that you could write book after book on any time in history that you want in this area. Now what made this come about and started this place really up on the map was a guy called Alexander Allen Arthur. He was an Englishman, a land speculator, and he started the American Association here back in the late 1880s. And he acquired this company that he furnished the backers from England, started this. They acquired 80,000 acres here. Now this is what Middlesboro looked like, the basin, in 1880. Now they said this is the only city in the world that's made in a crater caused by a meteor millions of years ago. But he found so much coal reserves here that's never been touched, and so much untouched timber, logging to go on here, natural resources. And what really got it really invested in was they found iron ore in Cumberland Mountain on the south side, and they began to mine it heavily. This was widely used across the country at the time. Now this is Middlesboro in the early days, in 1890, getting a big start. It grew from a few hundred to thousands in just a few weeks. It was a gold rush, and here it is in 1890, had their own trolley system, building all these buildings as fast as they could build them. This place was a booming place, and it was probably at one time the largest growing place for a few years in the country. Well, he needed a railroad to move all these natural resources, goods in and out, and he planned to build a railroad and contracted through L&N and them contractors for $30,000. And these men, they come from all over the country for work and jobs, building these tunnels, building all these trestles across these waterways and these hollers and gorges that it had to cover between the Gap and Knoxville. And there was a lot of work going on. They started this in about 1887, started the railroad. And this place prospered so much by the backers from England that he even built luxury places like the Four Seasons Hotel. And this is the site later on to become the site of the day's LMU College here in Harrogate, Tennessee, just below the Gap. And you can see the old structures that still stand back when the American Association started this place. Luxury hotels and inns, this no longer stands here today. Old history. In the Gap, it was a thriving place too. All this work and money going on, really going at it, growing like weeds. And the first little depot built here at the Gap, just from the tunnel they was building, this is what it looked like before they built the newer one. And a little bit later on, they built a station here in Middlesboro called Union Station in 1910. I can remember playing around that as a small child before they tore it down. Now they finished the Cumberland Gap Tunnel in August 8th of 1889. And they was building the railroad from both ends, coming from the north and the south, and they met at the tunnel. That was the last one. Well, this tickled Alexander to death and all of his investors. He was tickled to death. So he was planning to make the first luxury ride up there to Middlesboro and the Gap, since the tunnel was done and the railroad is complete. And I'm sure he took some tycoons with him and investors from England and all the land speculators that owned and invested in this heavily, bankers, luxury riding like this, towards the Gap from Knoxville. And they traveled in style and luxury from about 30 miles going north out of Knoxville towards the Gap. So they thought. But here's something that history don't tell you much of, but you have to research. There was a disaster here, 30 miles out of Knoxville, north of Knoxville, that they don't tell you much about. So that puts it in this vicinity between Luttrell and Washburn on the map. They were traveling, and one of the little trestles gave out, and the passenger cars fell into it, and it killed 7 people, and dozens were badly injured. This was devastating. This is worse than the one in Lonesome Valley. Well, Alexander was one of them who was badly injured. He had really bad internal injuries, and he was put in the hospital for a few weeks. And he's lucky he survived. But he got over it, and he took the train ride on up to the Gap. But that was just the beginning of his bad troubles. The banks failed in England, his investors. Money quit flowing, and they wasn't getting much reimbursed for their money coming back for what they invested in. But later on, a few years later, the panic of 1893, a depression set in. Hard times come to these mountains. All the money was cut off. But these old mountain people, they knowed how to survive. But the money was cut off and things died. They even sold off this hotel, pennies on the dollar, luxury hotel. Gone. The site of LMU now. But like I said, he got stuff started so much that it couldn't be stopped. Yeah, the money was tight, but all these companies was in here, and they was in these mountain resources of coal and lumber and iron ore, and they built these mountains. They run these railroads up these hollers, these mining camps, and all these logging facilities, and the goods flowed between Knoxville and the Gap. And things started building back up. The railroad was doing good. And they even run across these big trestles here. This is a trestle, supposed to be a picture of Lonesome Valley train trestle in Cleveland County. And I'm sure they was maintained best they could in them days with what they had to work with. Little crews like this, keeping the line and the rail up and keeping it inspected. These trestles, they just built them out of timber they cut down in the local area and cut them up, sawed them up, and put them in these trestles. Well, that all went well till a few years later, and this is when the Lonesome Valley train trestle wreck happened. Here's the partial newspaper clipping on it. You can read it here. I'll give you time. You could stop and read it. This is just a partial clipping that I could find. And I reckon 2 men died in this. There was 9 people on this train. It was a freight train. And the engineer and the train and the caboose, the tender, he died. That's 2 that died in this. The rest of them were okay. Now they claim that they used too heavy an engine pulling this load, overweighted the trestle. I don't know why they didn't check on that. But there's the old trestle. You've seen the picture. Wasn't long after that, they started rebuilding. They put all metal up, steel. And one by one, these old wooden trestles was going away, and they replaced them with steel. L&N Railroad did. Because this is a vital key to the mountains. A lot of hard work ensued on these trestles, high off the ground. But they still stand today, these old trestles. Here in Lonesome Valley, it still stands. It's not used as much since the coal industry's kind of slowed down, but they're still here today, and they still use this railroad line. But it's slowly going away like everything else in time. But it's still here, and it's still being used. And these old trains, these old lines, most of them's gone away, but some of them are still being used commercially for tourists in the mountains, and I'm glad to see it. I wish they'd do that between the Gap and Knoxville. That would be one heck of a trip. In Middlesboro, this is what it looks like today. Still thriving. Looking off the pinnacle, across the mountain, into the Tennessee side. Such beautiful mountains here. This is where I grew up. And this is Cumberland Gap today. So much history has passed in these areas that you could write book after book on it, whatever year you're talking about. So I hope you enjoy these. I love finding history and sharing it. It's going away, so I want to thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy this. God bless you, take care, and I'll see you next time.